G'day and welcome to Beyond Sobriety, a podcast where you'll hear real stories of recovery and resilience come to life. I'm Michael and I'm an alcoholic, your host and fellow journeyer on the road to sobriety. As someone who has walked the path of addiction and found solace in the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, I understand the challenges and triumphs that come with striving for sobriety. And it's with this understanding and empathy that we've created this podcast. Our purpose here at Beyond Sobriety is simple yet profound: to provide a platform where individuals can share their experience with alcoholism openly and authentically. Through candid conversation, personal narrative, and expert insights, we aim to inspire hope, foster understanding, and offer a beacon of light to those still navigating the shadows of addiction. We'd love for you to be a part of this growing community. If you find value in the stories that you hear today, please consider liking and leaving a comment and sharing this episode with somebody who might benefit from hearing it. Your support will help spread the message of hope and resilience to more people who need it. I'm Michael and I'm an alcoholic, and this is Beyond Sobriety. So I'm here with Viv. Viv, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Viv. I'm 16 months sober. I'm a writer and I'm 38 years old.
So 16 months. Well, firstly, congratulations. It's always an achievement. Every day sober is an absolute blessing, in my opinion. And so congratulations on getting there.
Yeah, it is a blessing. It's been the biggest gift to me, something that I initially viewed as a sacrifice. It's turned out to be the complete opposite to that.
Oh, absolutely. 30 seconds without alcohol when you had a drink in the fridge was a sacrifice. I mean, well, that's what it was like with me, but I guess we'll get to see what you're like. But let's go back. What was the attitude towards alcohol within your family when you were a child?
I was around. I had family members that were alcoholics, but it wasn't in my household an issue. I think the attitude was a celebratory attitude. It wasn't a stable, if that makes sense.
So it brought out on special occasions.
Correct, yeah. Yep. It wasn't like a daily occurrence or an issue in my house, but I certainly noticed that change in my broader family as I got older. You know, I lost 3 family members to drugs and alcohol.
Oh, really? It got that bad?
Yeah, not in my immediate family, but in my broader family.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then friends as well, 3 friends I've lost to drugs and alcohol. As a young child, I only saw it as adults did for fun. So it didn't immediately affect any of my childhood memories per se.
Yeah. In
the early days, no.
So that was when you were growing up. So it wasn't like an everyday thing. You didn't see your parents getting drunk or anything like that.
No.
So when did you decide to start picking up alcohol as a young adult or teenager?
The first time I remember I was about 15, which was in comparison to some of the other friends I had was late, compared to people that were drinking 12, 13. I was at a friend's house and they were drinking and I was resistant to it. And then I just folded under peer pressure. And we were drinking whiskey and green cordial mixed together.
But that's an unusual mix. I can tell you were 15 when that was going on then.
And just, that old trick of topping up the bottle with tea bags or whatever it was to try and make the line go higher. But, it just didn't end well. I didn't know how to temper how much, especially for a slight body. Just remember being in the shower, throwing up incessantly, falling over myself and being put to bed. So that was my first encounter with it. And in the early days of drinking, it wasn't it didn't feel like an issue. It didn't feel like something that I wanted to do again. Because I didn't know how to temper it. I saw people having fun, but from the get-go, I would just go hard and then out.
So you never just had 1 or 2 and were like, okay, I'm happy now. It was once you started, it was you're going the whole way.
Yeah.
Do you remember what was going through your mind with that first drink? What was happening in your head?
I was fearful of drugs and alcohol before, it kind of got a hold of me. It wasn't something that, because I'd seen the effects that it did, and I never really wanted to feel like that.
Yes.
But once I got that lack of inhibition or that complete destruction of that numbness, that's what started to stick.
Yeah, so you had boundaries until you started to drink.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's what it sounds like. When did you experience, you mentioned earlier that you experienced some death and some alcohol and drug addiction. Was that before you started to, I guess, experiment with alcohol or after?
No, after.
Afterwards?
Yeah.
Okay. So this was obviously during your high school time. Would you say your drinking was typical or more than that?
In high school, it was definitely typical.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even into my early 20s, like everything would be, you know, going out, partying. It was extreme, don't get me wrong, but it was everybody around me was doing the same thing, you know, like having really late nights in King's Cross and, you know, partying for days and those kinds of things, but keeping a job and not drinking midweek on my own or anything like that.
Yeah.
So in my 20s, it wasn't so much an issue. It was pretty standard up until probably the late 20s, I'd say.
So very much a work hard, play hard kind of mentality rather than this is what I need to get out of bed or every night when I get home.
Yeah. The common things I see as when it got exacerbated were when my mental health was suffering.
Okay.
You know, because I would use it as Band-Aid to numb myself, to drown out the noises, to like through that sort of self-worth.
Yeah.
Always kind of attributed to that. So, you know, for me, I'm not sure if you're familiar with that term, the dark night of the soul, you know, where, I don't know, for me it's been every decade it has been an occurrence. So it's where like an existential crisis where I feel like I don't know anything anymore. You know, like your world gets turned upside down. You question your career, you question so many things, your relationships, friendships, your purpose. I feel like it's just been a common occurrence for me. And in the past, when those things would happen, I would notice my drinking would increase.
Yes.
And then that would just make the trail of destruction a lot harder.
Yeah, we reach for a solution which is more of the problem.
Yeah.
That's what I found. I guess if we go to your early 20s, what did you do when you left school?
I worked in media.
Okay.
Yeah, I worked in media and in a corporate career in media. Moved to Sydney, was living in Sydney for quite a long time, decade or so. Had a pretty good life by all accounts, you know, on the exterior. Then I went back to university.
Okay.
So I went to university as a mature age student.
Yep.
Was following my dreams there. Not everyone was really supportive of that kind of idea for me.
Yeah. You said you left home when you were 19.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite young.
Yeah.
Was there a reason for that?
I grew up in a small town. Where I first grew up in a Western Sydney suburb, it was quite multicultural. I felt like I could relate to people a lot because there wasn't a lot of judgment. I grew up around a diverse group of people, and that made me feel like, it made me feel empowered. It made me feel like I understood the world around me.
Yes.
And then I moved to a sort of country town when I was 8, and it was very homogenized. It felt like everybody was there was only one cookie cut away, and I just felt stifled. I felt really stifled, like it was I wasn't able to express myself, even the way I dressed, the way I spoke. I felt like I was judged for sort of everything that I said, the way I looked, because I didn't, you know, do the same things as all the other young girls did.
Okay.
And, you know, I had a really big imagination and I just felt really stifled. And that kind of continued, to be honest, into even my schooling years.
Yes.
And I've thought back to that in terms of my drinking a lot, because my power or my ability to express myself through my imagination was my greatest power.
Yes.
But also was probably what caused me to feel like an outcast.
Yeah.
So I used to just hide that and bury that a lot of the time. So, yes, I moved to Sydney when I was 19, and that was a conscious decision. And I kind of always knew that would come because, you know, I spent a lot of time in Sydney. My grandma used to take me into the city a lot when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And I liked what it had to offer. I liked the diversity. I liked seeing myself reflected in, you know, other people. So I did that as a conscious decision to emancipate myself.
No, that's fair. I mean, I left home when I was 17 years old, and out of all my brothers and sisters, I'm the only one that has never needed to come back home to live.
Yeah, I'm the same.
Yeah, I feel a sense of pride in that.
I feel the same, yeah. And I never really wanted to do that. My independence was a huge thing for me. It still is. Probably my number one value.
Yes.
But what I have started to realise, especially since getting sober and having a community, is that I used to think connection was like just a nice to have.
Yes.
Connection with others, connection with family. I thought it was just a nice fluffy thing. And I didn't realise how fundamental it was to survival, you know, and that's what kept me drinking, was a lack of connection.
When I was young, my mum told me this story, and she said she fought buying a microwave for a long time because she said, I don't need it, until she got it. And then she wondered how she could live without it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what connection is to an alcoholic, or just to anyone.
Yeah.
It's the idea of going, oh, I don't need this, because maybe you haven't felt that in the past, or you haven't really understood it, or it's something that you struggle to build with other people.
Yeah, I think it's a control tactic. It was for me. I always felt like if I could keep everyone at an arm's distance, no one would be able to abandon me first.
Yeah, fair enough.
Like that was a degree of it, or just that vulnerability came with disappointment.
Was there a reason you used the word abandon? Is there someone in your life that's left, or you felt that way?
I think it's probably more that I've abandoned myself.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. I just grew up quickly, and I understand where that kind of come from. Like, I always wanted to do things myself. I wanted to be independent. I wanted to be a leader. I just was super ambitious to a really destructive point that it pushed people away.
It's amazing how similar we are. After I hear you talk, I always look back and I go, I grew up way too fast.
Yeah.
And I look at my children and some of them are doing the same thing. And I go, just stop, slow down, enjoy it, because you're going to be an adult forever. You're only a kid for a short period of time.
It's ironic, really, because in the last 16 months, I feel way more childlike than I have from my earliest memories.
Yeah?
Yeah, because I'm seeing the world through fresh eyes, it seems. Maybe it's a connection to God as well. I do think that helps.
Did you have a connection to God before?
Yeah, I did as a kid.
Yeah.
You know what? I did even into early adulthood, I would probably say. Went to a Catholic school, and I always believed in the Catholic version of God.
Yeah.
But what I probably never really understood was the spiritual side of it as much, which this program, like the AA program, has led me into, because that of my understanding versus dogma,
yes,
is a very different thing. I still felt connected to God when I was a kid. I'd pray. I remember the Lord's Prayer on a plate in my bedroom. I always felt quite connected.
Yes.
But I lost that once hypocrisy started coming into it a bit, where I was comparing, this person goes to church, but look at the way that they live their lives. I started just to get a really narrow view of it, and it's pushed me away from it.
Look, it can, look, I can really sympathise. I see that as well. And for people who know, I have a very religious background, so I can really sympathise with that. But one of the things that actually helped me was not my religion when it came to that, but was AA, when you're doing the resentments.
Yeah.
And that one of the lines in there where it says, understanding that they are spiritually sick as well.
Mm-hmm.
After I look back on my drinking career, I can see all the things that I've done, and I just go, I have no right to judge anyone for anything they do.
I found that part of the program was to date the most empowering, because I could see how I had done the same things that had stuck in my body and stuck in my soul, in my spirit, made me sick, to other people in other ways. But until I'd laid it out like that, and then got to the part where, okay, how have you done this to others, or where can you see parallels? I honestly would have justified that just thinking, well, that circumstance is completely different to what I did.
Yeah.
Just in a different colour lipstick. I found that really liberating, because I never wanted to identify myself as a victim. But when I was drinking, I was, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm not that I played it out that way, but I think just drinking in general kind of kept me stuck in that that everybody else was the problem and not me.
Yeah. Now, you just made that statement, and it reminds me of what you said earlier. You said you moved to a country town and you felt judged, and people were judging you. Now, I had an understanding of what my perception of reality was when I was young, and it wasn't until I experienced something recently on the holidays when I went back home and saw a report card that really challenged my assumptions on that.
Okay.
Because I always thought I was dumb, I can't read, I can't spell, I've got terrible handwriting, all these things. And I was like, I was picked on, and none of the teachers liked me. This is the narrative I was telling myself. And I believed that. Mm-hmm. And then I saw my report card recently when I was going home, and my mum got it out and said, we found this. And she gave it to me, and I read through it, and I was like, this is a good report card.
Yeah.
And it really challenged my assumptions. And what I've learnt through that experience is that maybe the reality that I thought was there wasn't. And I was wondering, have you considered that with your...
Yeah, absolutely I have. Because kids will just be kids, right? I've put some pretty big ideas across why I felt the way I did when I felt isolated. I mean, it could be as simple as the fact that changing schools and changing areas is a big thing within itself.
Yes.
You know, and that I part of had to leave a life behind and then find a new one. You know, there certainly is an element of that. And maybe I just felt alien within myself. I was very self-expressive. I was always a drama kid, as in like always did theatre and very expressive, always danced. And I just sort of always had a way of expressing myself. That was big. I felt like I took up a lot of space.
Yeah.
You know, and the town I moved to, you know, it didn't cater for a lot of that. And that's not even though I'm making that judgment, I did feel that way, you know.
Oh, I've got no doubt.
No, and I hear what you mean though. It's funny about reframing because you don't really know what the reality was because you attach so much emotion to it.
Yeah, like what I found I was doing was I was framing and making my decisions as an adult based on a perception of myself, which I look back and it really knocked the floor from under me because I looked at that and I thought, is anything that I believe true?
Yeah.
And then as I was falling, I was there in my head saying to myself, this is an opportunity to reshape who you are. Because if I got this wrong, what other lies was my brain telling me because of my own insecurities that I've allowed to stop me? I
hear you so strongly on that. And that's what kept me drinking too, to a degree. Like I thought about for 2 years before I stopped, when it was time, you know, it was time. Every sign around me, everything within myself was resisting, basically resisting alcohol in general. I knew I didn't want to drink anymore for about 2 years before I stopped. I kept on it because I started thinking about exactly those things, you know, catastrophizing what the outcome would be, what would I lose from it, you know, who was going to abandon me, who wasn't going to be by my side anymore. Some of those things have actually happened, no doubt. But at the same time, I wasn't even thinking about what the possibilities would be, like the benefits would be, you know. And so I hear you in terms of looking back on anything. It is hard to know 100%, and that's scientific research in that too, that when we think about our memories, especially very, very far ago memories, that the reality versus exactly what happened isn't always the way. It isn't. And how could you know when you're thinking about an 8-year-old child?
Oh, exactly. That's why they say eyewitness testimony is the weakest form of evidence in a court.
Yeah,
because,
totally.
Like, I saw an event when I was young, and I don't want to spend too much more time on this, but I saw an event when I was young of this man in a wheelchair, and he wheeled himself off 3 or 4 steps, and he went down and he cracked his head on the floor. And there was blood everywhere. It was horrific.
Jeez.
I saw some people freeze. I looked there and I felt like I had an out-of-body experience. I looked there, I thought, okay, he's hurt. Someone needs to call an ambulance. Who's got a phone? And this was a time when not many people had a phone. I was like, wait, I've got a phone. There's a phone in my hand. I was like looking at it. It was like, and I was like, all right, I'll call and I'll ask for an ambulance. And as I was on the phone, one guy with a family, probably about the same age as I am now, started freaking out, yelling, swearing, just getting angry. And this other woman got down on her knees and started stroking the guy's head and saying, you're going to be okay. Everything's going to be fine. And then the guy got angry at her saying, why did you push him? And I was on the phone to the ambulance and I had to stop. I said, mate, she didn't push him. He's like, I saw her push him. I said, that didn't happen.
Shit.
Didn't take place whatsoever.
Yeah.
But the thing is, if I wasn't there and he told the cops that, she could have got arrested.
I feel like I've been on the receiving end of, you know, a rumor or like things that someone has said has happened that hasn't happened. I think everyone's experienced that at one time in their life. That sort of resentment, those kinds of things there, when you could spend your whole life trying to fight on what the accuracy, or someone talks about you, you know, like there's so many examples of those things happening. And, you know, the more I have realized to just let them, you know, like that let them sort of theory that I don't know if you know, familiar with Mel Robbins, she talks about this let them theory, right? Just let it happen. You know what I mean? Like the more you try and shape shift people's perception of you into what you want it to be, that's the biggest waste of time. But obviously when, you know, we were talking about our own memory and our own lived experience, but when you attach emotion to things, it does really cloud it, right? Even as a kid, I'm like, that could have just been the way that I felt. No doubt, I'm a highly, highly emotional, sensitive person. Was that reality? I don't really know, Thank God it's something so simple as like the way that I think back on. Like, to me, that's all visceral too. It's like the colours that were there in the playground, how I felt. Was I playing Sailor Moon, There's, which I was. I was playing Sailor Moon. I didn't like one of the girls in the group because she wouldn't let me be. She always made me be Jupiter. But you know what I mean? So I wanted to play prank calls on her, and it's a long story. That's a whole other story. I was I had a vendetta from a young age. Don't you worry about that.
Sounds like you got a resentment to work through. Oh, that's outstanding. I totally get it. There's a great SNL skit, I believe. It's SNL. And there's these two guys. One of them's casually SMSing someone going, oh, we can go out if you want or whatever. And the other guy's reading it, getting angry and responding angrily.
Yeah.
And it's all about the perception at the time. And one of them's fine, the other one's not getting, and it's how we can get into our own heads.
Totally. About like the subtext of an email, like tone or whatever else. And it's like far out. It's a generational thing too, right? Like you look at, if mum messages me, it has to be like, hi, Viv, and then all of the, information. It's like a letter.
Yes.
And if you write back, one or two letters, are you okay? There's something wrong with you because you haven't done the essay back. And it's just that sort of generational thing around that you can't speak in short.
So true. At what point did drinking shift from being a weekend thing to, a solution?
About 10 years ago, I'd say. Oh, yeah, about 10 years ago. The core thing was I wouldn't be able to spend time on my own. I really couldn't sit with myself. Always had to be busying myself. And when I was alone, I would drink.
Yes.
Because I would think that I would slow my head down. I also had I was under this illusion that it brought me closest to something spiritual. I felt like smarter. I felt better. I felt more like in tune, more tapped in. I'd go through my call list, call my mates that I hadn't spoken to in a long time, or it made me feel like the best version of myself until it didn't.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain in that sense of what was going through my mind when I would do those things, because it was like I could set down the person that I thought I was and become the person that I thought I wanted to be.
Yeah.
But that stopped pretty dramatically when it became a problem, probably say 2-3 years before I stopped drinking. Those feelings weren't there anymore, that elation or that feeling good when I drank. I always felt when I drank.
Yeah.
It was like the dopamine or whatever was being released, it just didn't work. I think about the Verve song, the drugs don't work.
Yes.
I think about that, like what do you do when the thing that you've run to escape yourself and that fixes all the problems isn't working anymore?
Yeah.
It was almost like, and then I just I resented it even more because I'd be like, putting this shit in my body, I'm still getting hungover. I'm still getting the anxiety. I'm still shameful that I'm doing it, but I'm not getting the buzz.
You're not getting the positive effect.
I'm not getting anything positive out of it anymore.
Numbed yourself too much that it wasn't able to.
Yeah, I just numbed myself to the point that I was numb.
Yep.
Nothing was going to change that. And so the bar kept getting high. I'd have to drink more, or whatever else, and then end up in a blackout and not get the fun part at the beginning.
Yeah.
So the dial kept moving. But what I do remember as probably what pushed it into a really hard direction was, I feel like this is the most cliche thing to say, but it was COVID. I'd be working from home in COVID and I'd just start drinking 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'd work till some obscure hour, 10 to midnight, I just keep working.
Yep.
So I was pissed. I'd be firing off emails thinking I was the smartest person in the world.
That was your work product in that time.
That's what I mean. It was just, and it was my ego. What I was trying to do is get some kind of semblance of control, stuck at home. I didn't hate that, to be honest, because I wasn't having to travel 4 hours a day for work. I didn't hate that, but what it did really do was exacerbate this not being able to be alone thing, because I was alone in the house. So the drinking started earlier, and what that really tells me is I couldn't sit with myself from a very long time, because I was scared of my power in terms of scared of my imagination. I was scared of my creativity, so I would drown it out because those were such loud noises in my head. They're my biggest assets now, but they've terrified me.
Yeah.
So I would just drown them out. What I have learned is since I've stopped is sitting with them and being able to write, being able to do poetry, being able to express myself in the ways that I do. Was they were there all along, but they wanted me to befriend them, and I just never took the chance to do that. So the more I drank, the louder they got the next day. So it became a progressive problem, I would say. I have a note in my phone from, I think it was about 18 months before I quit. And I remember waking up the next day and I wrote this sort of tirade around, I need to stop drinking. It makes me feel anxious. It makes me feel shameful. Like I want to do this. And
yeah.
I think it was 2 months before it was 2 months before I stopped drinking, that timeline. But I had moments like that all the time. I had one person that I knew that was sober in my life.
So you said you're alone. Where were you living during COVID?
In Southwest Sydney.
Okay, so you're out of the city.
Yeah, so I moved back out of the city around 2014.
Okay.
Working at home alone. My husband and I have lived together for the last 10 years. So. Mm-hmm.
Were you a daily drinker?
No.
You would drink how often and how much?
4 days a week, I would say. 8 to 10 drinks per time, sometimes more.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to, once I started, I wouldn't be able to stop.
Yes.
Until, like, if it was, as an example, if we were at a party, everyone would go to bed, I would still be up on my own. I couldn't go until I dropped, basically, you know. I wasn't always a blackout drinker, but most of the time in the end I was a blackout drinker. There was something inside of me once I had a drink that just never wanted that feeling to go away.
Yeah.
That, like, it was almost like a desperation. And then the amount that I could drink in the end was scary. My last drink, as an example, I drank almost a whole bottle of vodka, and I'd had pre-drinks prior to that. Yeah, I just couldn't be a 1 or 2 drinker at all.
It's interesting to me, and it's something I've had to come to terms with, is because I assumed when I came into AA that everyone would drink like I did, which was daily. And it was confusing to me that some people wouldn't drink daily, because I thought, how else is there to drink? Because that was my go-to. Every day on the way home from work, I would start drinking.
Yeah, right.
In the car on the way home from work, I would start drinking every single day. And the idea of going one day without it filled me with such anxiety, fear, all these feelings that made me have to drink. And so it took me a while to realize that there's some people that wasn't their case. It was once they started drinking, they couldn't stop.
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong. When I started drinking, I would stop when I fell asleep. Usually when I started drinking, that was pretty quick, because I'd drink a lot and I'd pass out in weird spaces.
Yeah. And I hear you on that. For me, I know why. I know why it wasn't an everyday occurrence. And it was because I would reset my goals through the shame and rinse and repeat every week, right? So, for example, Monday to Wednesday, I would train really hard at the gym. I would eat like a saint. I would do all these things to try and undo the damage that I'd done for the previous 4 days and reset my goals in terms of, I'm not going to drink like that again, you know? And this went on loop for about 10 years, you know? So that's why I would have that, like, break. And then on a Wednesday or a Thursday, it would be like, you know, the gates would open. And it would just be that cycle all over again. Yeah. You know? So that's why for me it was because I was shame, punishment on repeat, shame, punishment on repeat. So I kept thinking to myself that it was going to change. And that's why I wouldn't do it. I'd white knuckle it, you know, for the start of the week, because I'd done so much damage that I'd be like, as in, you know, to my body or the way that I was feeling, that I'd be like, this. I don't want to feel like this again. Yeah. But I didn't have any strategies. I didn't have any support, not from my relationships. I wasn't sharing how I was feeling so much. I wasn't sharing that this was an issue for me. And that's what kept me stuck, is that I was watching everybody else do it. So there's nothing wrong with me, but I'm wired differently. I am wired with the way that I have to feel about it. I'm wired with the way that they can have 1 or 2 drinks and not, you know, feel the same. Well, everyone's like, you know, even when I stop, people are like, you weren't that bad. You're so much fun when you're drinking, or whatever else. I'm like, you don't have the demons that I have to fight in the aftermath, and I'm not here to entertain you. You know, like, that's been a big thing for me, is what I realized is, like, every time I would be out, I'd be, I remember, oh, you're the life of the party, or you're this, you know, you're so much fun. I'll be like, yeah, but it comes at such a cost to me, because I'm not here to entertain you. And that's sort of what I felt my role was for a bit of time in a party environment. But when I was on my own, it was like the sad clown, you know, like a Robin Williams kind of vibe where I'd be like, oh, finally I can just be a drunk at home.
Less pressure. Look, I think we break a lot of promises to a lot of people, but the most promises we break is to ourselves.
100%.
You mentioned something about, you know, you wrote almost like a letter to yourself saying that you wanted to stop drinking, and you know you feel all these different emotions with it. I'm not a person that writes, but I did something similar when I was drunk or drinking or even just hungover. I'd look in the mirror. I'd say the most horrible things about myself. I would swear at myself, and I'm not a big swearer, and I'll just say how much of a liar and pathetic and how much of a, you know, piece of crap I am, and say how much I hate myself. And I'd look at the mirror and say these things to myself. And it's because it was probably one of the only times I could feel I could be honest about how I felt.
Yeah.
And I didn't have that outlet. Hi, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed the show so far. This podcast is all about sharing real stories of resilience, recovery, and hope. Stories that remind us that we're not alone in this journey. If you'd like to support this work and help us reach more people, there are a few simple ways you can make a difference. Take a moment to like this episode, leave a comment, or share it with someone who you think might benefit from hearing it, whether it's a friend, family member, or somebody in your recovery community. Your support could touch the lives and inspire someone in their road to sobriety. Your stories are important. They remind us that we are not alone and help us all stay sober. What we're doing here creates a space where people can share their experiences, feel understood, and find inspiration to keep moving forward. By supporting the show, you're helping to amplify those voices and ensure that more people who need to find this message can. If you'd like to share your story and be interviewed, please email me at beyondsobrietyaa@gmail.com. Every journey is unique, and your experience could be exactly what someone needs to hear to find hope, strength, or inspiration. This podcast thrives on real stories from real people, and your voice has the power to make a difference in somebody's life. Don't hesitate to reach out. I'd love to connect and discuss how your story can be a part of Beyond Sobriety. Thank you for your support. Together we can continue to make a difference. Now, let's get back to the episode.
Getting well was the opposite of what I had tried in the past. All I had tried was punishment, shame, you know, this cycle of absolutely terrorizing myself because I thought it was a willpower thing. You know, if you can't do that, how come you can do all these other things? How come you can get promoted and you get all these accolades, but you can't stop drinking, you know?
I saw it as a sense of pride. I'd look at there and go, look at where I am with my job. I made X amount this year. I'm in this position here. I'm better, you know, I'm better than so many other people, and yet I still managed to get drunk every night. You know, imagine if I wasn't. Imagine what else I could achieve. But, you know, I'm better than you working at half capacity.
Well, this is
it's madness.
It is absolute madness. It is absolute madness. And if I look at the way that my life has turned around in the last 16 months, is that the things that I valued on the outside, and, you know, to be fair, I didn't even really value them. I just thought everybody else was proud of me for them. You know, had a highly successful job, or like, you know, like top of my game in a job that I hated, to be completely frank, earned really good money that made me miserable, was drinking too much, but everything else seemed to be moving in the right direction. So was it really a problem, like these questions that you ask yourself?
The lies,
you know? Could go on overseas holidays, was married to the love of my life, still am, and that is an absolute blessing. Why do I feel so empty inside?
I know.
You know what? Why do I feel so empty inside? Like, it was just a constant question that I'd ask myself. I'm like, I've dug this garden, you know, I've harvested this garden, but it's in the wrong spot. You know, it's blooming. It's got all different hydrangeas and it's beautiful to look at. It just wasn't my garden.
Yeah.
You know, and I had to so now here I am 16 months later in this position of going, I don't have a job at the moment, you know, which is huge for me. I'm in riders clubs, women's golf clubs. I'm part of all these community things that bring me so much joy. So everything I thought I knew about myself from the outside has been flipped on its head. You know, all these ideals of myself. I'm so honest with my family about where I'm at, which is something I have never been able to do because I thought that they wanted this one-dimensional view of who I was. The minute that I got honest, when I got honest with myself, that these things weren't bringing me joy, they were external things. They were things that I had built up in my head as success mechanisms. And by all means, yes, I need an income. Yes, those things are important, but to what degree? I've got to find what that looks like for me now. We talked about earlier, faith or a spiritual connection. Those things now, I realize that when I do my part, I take the action, the rest of that stuff was never really up to me. I started taking the wheel all the time and I was controlling as anything. If things didn't go my way, people, places, things, I would manipulate the situation. And I didn't realize until probably even doing the resentment sheets that manipulation isn't the fact that don't get me wrong, I wasn't unkind to people. That's not what I'm saying. I just had to make sure everything came into Viv's world.
Yep.
It had to be on my terms. And if it didn't, then I would be miserable. Now I've kind of let go of that control. I think if I just take the action, really, we'll see what happens.
When you decided that you wanted to stop drinking, did you try anything before you tried AA?
I did hypnotherapy, which was the biggest crock I've ever experienced.
Someone tried to hypnotize me once and it was like, you are successful and strong and, you will pass your tests. And I was like, oh my gosh.
It was the biggest crock. I really
Was that what yours was like?
It was weird. It was weird.
Weird whale music in the background?
It was weirder than that. And I paid I paid $350.
Oh,
and I remember, it was a full charlatan experience, full on charlatan. Because, back then I knew nothing about the program. I just thought that it was a willpower issue.
Yes.
And I thought that I could never do this on my own. So I wanted a quick silver bullet. I wanted the silver bullet.
And quick fix. Who doesn't? Yeah.
And so I went there. It was ridiculous and tried to sign up to some pyramid scheme. Anyway, I got out of thank goodness I just paid the money that I'd agreed to and I got out of there relatively unscathed. Anyway, and then I did an AA meeting through COVID online.
Okay.
A friend asked me to come along because I shared with her of how I was, and I clearly wasn't ready for it. I haven't even thought about this for quite a while, actually. And I did an online meeting, and I remember having to say I'm an alcoholic, and it terrified me. It absolutely terrified me.
Well, I didn't say it the first time.
I struggled with that for quite a while, to be honest.
Yeah. So it's like, who you idiots think you guys are?
Yeah, I struggled with that because this independence value that I had, especially, to go that one step further and say, I'm powerless over alcohol and that my life had become unmanageable. I was like, again, coming back to the ego, what I said, I have a good job at the time I did. I have a good job. How is my, I'm earning good money. I've got my stuff together. How is that unmanageable? But the chaos inside.
No, it's all in your head. No, I completely get it. And I actually think, and look, I don't know if I even want to say this, but I think the whole modern psychology movement where they're not labeling people as alcoholics or addicts or this, what they'll find is that is actually more damaging because it's a way of people not owning their own problems.
Anyone who won't go to great lengths to get honest with themselves, and I've seen it plenty of times. Without a program, I just know it wouldn't work.
No,
for myself, that emotional sobriety part, coming back to connection. I can't speak for everyone, but for me, it was a connection issue. It took me a long time to realize that. That's why I drank. Completely disconnected from myself, disconnected from others. I only wanted people to see me in one light, the light that I cultivated.
Yeah, it's a mask. We all wear masks. I think everybody in the world wears masks, but I think especially alcoholics, we put on a biggest show for everybody until it all comes crashing down spectacularly.
Yeah.
That's generally how I feel. You mentioned very briefly about a rock bottom, but you didn't go into details. Was there anything like catastrophic or was it just a realization or an awakening? What was your rock bottom?
I didn't like who I was. It was a hard truth. I didn't like who I was. I always said I did. That was my rock bottom when I realized I can't accept this reality. I would be so envious of people who could spend time on their own, I could be independent, I could go to see a movie on my own. But what I mean by being still is what I mean, not being on my own. I could easily be on my own, but I couldn't be still.
Yeah.
And I had this massive envy of that. And I thought it was almost like a come to Jesus moment where I had a vision of what I'm at the halfway point of my life almost. This is what you're going to do for the rest of it. It was like life's a banquet and I'm eating the same meal every day. Legit. This is rinse, repeat. And by general standards, pretty privileged. I hadn't planned to stop drinking. I just remember waking up that next day. It was my mum's 60th birthday. And I was like, I can't show up to things that really matter to me like this. I'm sick of this. And I was finally done in a way that I felt spiritually bankrupt.
That is outstanding. I love that because it didn't take some external force crashing down your marriage, you know, a loss of a job, a car accident where you killed someone, ending up in jail, waking up on the street or a stranger's bed. It didn't take anything like it was just a wake up moment going, I can't do this anymore.
But that stuff could have happened. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely.
And my point being with that, I have so much to be thankful for. I have this creativity inside of me that I knew was just waiting to be unpacked, and that it would just get to the point where I had wasted this talent, like wasted my talent. And I would just it was like I had a premonition almost, and I do believe this now to be God, 100% I believe this to be God. I woke up that day and I knew I was done.
Yeah.
I know I couldn't have kept going without the program, which I knew nothing about at the time, but I knew this time it was 100% different.
Like, because you probably could have picked up again, but it's about going, this is the turning point.
It was a turning point.
Yeah, this is a crossroad going, like, because I knew I was done, but I kept on drinking because I couldn't help myself. It took me several months before I was like, okay, I can stop this now.
Yeah, I haven't had a bust. I'm very, very grateful for that. But what I did pretty early on, once I got into the rooms, was, you know, made sure that I took a service position. Yeah. I kept going. I didn't really understand. Of course, no one does at the beginning. I didn't understand a lot of the literature side. I didn't really understand a lot of the jargon. But I did see people getting well. And I knew that if I tried to do it on my own, I wouldn't be able to.
Yeah.
So, yeah, a faith in something greater than myself. And that moment, even though it wasn't a rock bottom, it was, I feel like it was a salvation. It was enough. You know, a voice came through for me that day.
What would you say some of your high points are in sobriety?
The bucket list of my life had sat on a shelf relatively untouched. You know, like I had this roll of things that I wanted to do, and getting drunk just always took priority. And so, you know, doing anything adventurous would just sit there. The highlights of my sobriety are the relationship I have with my family. I can be so honest with them. I try and cultivate an image of myself. I'm just myself. Mm-hmm. And I don't preach my sobriety to anyone, but everybody that loves me, that wants to be in my life, can see that it's worked its magic into just who I am. I don't have anything to prove.
Yeah.
So I would say my relationship with my family has just galvanized my relationship with myself. Like, this is the first time in my life that I feel like I totally understand who I am and what I want.
You kind of feel comfortable in your own skin, don't you?
I do. I very much do. And would say those words before, and I actually kind of believed it, but now like when I was drinking, but I didn't, because the shame was with me 80% of the time.
Yeah.
So when you feel shame, it's very hard to have any true relationship with yourself. And I mean that truly. Like, I have a kindness that I feel like pours out of me effortlessly. Like, everything that I do, I try and give back. A conscious way of like thinking before I react. If someone one-upped me, I'd have to get them back. You know, everything was this game of like retaining an image. I have not one iota of feeling like I have to control my image or people's perception of me anymore.
Yeah.
I traveled to Morocco last year. My husband and I adventured around, and we also went to part of Europe. And that was an incredible experience, to be on a holiday for 3 weeks, you know, sober, you know, waking up early, seizing every opportunity and seeing the world through fresh eyes. The highlight for me, I see things like a child now. I see things with such a vulnerability and a tenderness, because I can be present. Whereas before, everywhere I went, my reward system would have to be activated with alcohol.
Yeah.
You know, like as an example, if I was playing golf before, I'd be like, I'll go for beers after, or have a couple of drinks after golf, you know. So when you're playing golf, you're thinking about something else because there's a reward at the end.
Yeah.
My reward circuit now is so much different. Like, I don't feel like I'm entitled. I used to feel entitled to everything, because alcohol to me, and I still see it, it makes people feel entitled that they've earned that at the end of it. You know?
I think when you're drinking, you can't be present because you always want to be drinking.
That's right.
And so even if you're in the most amazing, groundbreaking, earth-shattering moment of your life, if you don't have a drink of alcohol in your hand, that's where you are. You're not there. You're there physically, but not spiritually, emotionally. You know, you can't connect. You can't sit there and breathe and enjoy that.
Yeah.
And so you have that fresh perspective of looking at the sunset and going, this is outstanding. I could just sit here and just watch it. And I don't have to go anywhere. I don't have anything else to do because I'm not rushing off to get drunk, and you can clear your mind and just be present in that situation.
Yeah. I have it's a newfound curiosity for the world around me. I would say I'm doing everything I love.
What's your biggest realization about yourself?
My biggest realization about myself is for so long I operated on masculine energy. I was fueled by it in terms of the yang, the yin and the yang. I mastered the yang, I was always in a leadership position. I was always good at sport. I always trying to find, to prove myself, right?
Yeah.
In ways that was fueled by my ego. But I thought I had to do that to survive. I thought, I've been financially independent for a long time. I kind of picked up this attachment to masculine energy, as in harvesting my own masculine energy, just to get things done. And what I think I've realized over this last 16 months, I couldn't tap into that anymore because I felt like I did that as a survival technique, and it probably made me angry in a way and made me resentful and drinking. No one did that to me. I did that to myself, mind you. But I adapted this kind of air of strength to survive. And my biggest realization would be that I have so much more feminine energy and nurturing energy and vulnerability inside of me that I really never knew about.
And you like that side of yourself?
I'm learning to. Yeah. It's very stark in contrast. And I think it might be a reason why people around me have found polarizing compared to who I was. I think a lot of people that I love have distanced themselves from me because they might think I'm an imposter, if that makes sense. I feel like a sense of that has kind of come through me a little bit because I didn't realize how much of that was tied into.
Do you think that's them or you?
Could be, it could be. Like we talked about when I was younger,
yeah.
It's very hard for me to see very clearly other people's perceptions of me. That's just a reality for anyone, really.
That is true.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Why people might, the way that they perceive you. And I can see a common thread when you say that, when you question me on that, is from a kid feeling like that to an adult who still feels like that.
It just seemed like it was too much of a repeat of what you just said for me not to mention it.
I appreciate that.
I've got no qualifications to even ask a question, anything like that. But I was there going, what I've learned doing this show and talking to so many people is that we have a lie that we tell ourselves about the perceptions of other people, and then we frame our lives around that.
Yeah.
And what I heard you just do is do the same thing again in your sobriety. I'm going, don't go back there. Don't worry. To a degree, don't worry about what other people think. Don't worry about what they say about you or feel about you. Because imposter syndrome is something we feel about ourselves. And I felt that in my workplace. I did a team building exercise with a number of other members of the executive team in my work. Every single one of them had got at least 1 or 2 degrees. I didn't finish high school. And I was there going, how am I going to keep up in this workplace? And I was like, I should not be there. And so for the longest time, I either did one of 2 things. I kept my mouth shut or I spoke up too much. And it wasn't until I became comfortable with myself going, hey, you know what? They saw my resume. It was the people in that room that are now my peers that recommended me for this job. If they didn't think I had something valuable to add, then they wouldn't have done it.
I appreciate that because it's certainly where I'm at right now. What I think I'm dealing with is the loss of my old life. I'm grieving a bit of my old life being left behind. And so I'm trying to make sense of it. And I am more than happy to set it down. I want it to set it down. I don't want to turn my back on it by any means, but I'm happy to set it down. But what I am trying to do of late, because there has been a few things that have sort of happened, is make sense of it. I definitely meant what I said around the masculine and feminine energy. That's where I'm at right now. That doesn't mean that this is going to be for the rest of my life.
No.
And this is only a recent revelation to me of going balls to the wall, for lack of a better expression. I'm not as gung-ho about life that I used to be, but I'm just not there right now. That doesn't mean I made this grandiose claim of where I'm going.
Absolutely.
It's just where I'm at right now.
Yeah.
I'm doing yoga, I'm doing yoga teacher training, and I'm playing golf, and I'm writing poetry, and I'm doing all these things. I used to be making making money for businesses and negotiating every day, leading teams. So the disparity in the energy that I'm putting out there is so different. So that's why I'm trying to make sense of something.
I get it. But the thing is, what we do as a human race, we tend to attach more value to certain things, like earning money and like doing that. And that masculine energy that you were saying seems to be it's more rewarded at a societal level than the other things. But you know what? That doesn't mean that they're not as important.
That's right.
Not everything to do with my past life needs to be wiped away because of one aspect. There are positive aspects. That's why it's completely fine to go, hey, I grieve that past life because I was doing this and this and this, and hey, I was successful. And that's something to be really proud of.
Yeah.
And what you're doing is you're looking for yourself in the future going, how do I get the best aspects of me moving forward so I'm fulfilled?
I am trying to be really conscious of not throwing the baby out with the bathwater at the moment, because I am doing that to a degree, where I'm just trying to kind of get the whiteboard and just rub away parts of it. I'm not a bad person. I wasn't even a bad person then. I just wanted different things in my life, and that's why I'm here right now.
So what advice would you have for anybody who is stuck in the rut of drinking?
One day at a time. For me, it was finding my why. Once I found my why, there wasn't any looking back. Of course, you have to get honest with yourself, but my why was I wanted so badly to have a relationship with myself. Mm-hmm. If you never know, like I've seen people get sober and not emotionally sober, not do a program or not do any kind of work. And I've seen the reasons why they stop drinking still just sit there at the surface, but they're just not drinking. For me, it was finding my why because it gave me a place to work from and it gave me a reason not to go back.
Outstanding. Well, Viv, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. Why don't you lead us out with a serenity prayer?
God, grant me the serenity
to accept
the things that I cannot change, courage to change the things that I can,
and the wisdom to know the difference. Real legend, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us today on Beyond Sobriety. Just before we wrap up, I'd like to leave you with a gentle reminder. If you happen to recognize anyone who shared their story on this podcast, I urge you to respect their anonymity and privacy. Let's create a safe space where individuals can feel empowered to share their experience without fear of judgment or disclosure. And if you found today's episode helpful or inspiring, I encourage you to share Beyond Sobriety with somebody who might benefit from it. Together we can spread awareness, support and hope to those still struggling with alcohol addiction. Remember, your feedback is invaluable to us. If you have any thoughts, suggestions, or stories you'd like to share, please don't hesitate to reach out to me at beyondsobrietyaa@gmail.com. Thank you once again for tuning in. Until next time, stay strong, stay sober, and remember, you're not alone in this journey. I'm Michael, and I'm an alcoholic.